Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture, one weekly conversation at a time. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and a whole bunch of other venues. Just visit our sites, chimeraobscura.com/VM or vmspod.com to find more information, along with our RSS feed. And follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod. Wow, 600 episodes. I know I made a big deal out of number 500 back in 2022 when I got like 100 past guests to give tribute to the show and or, bust my balls about wasting my life doing this. But now we have rolled up on another big round number. It's been a weird 2 years since that number 500, but there have been some life-changing and fantastic episodes in that span. And just like with that one, I thought of trying to come up with a theme for number 600, but once the schedule started to come together this summer and once I realized I could sit down with an artist the stature of this week's guest, I thought, my work here is done. That guest is Joe Coleman, who is the subject of a phenomenal new retrospective collection from Fantagraphics, A Doorway to Joe, The Art of Joe Coleman. And this book, this coffee table book, this giant hardcover, brings together a ton of Joe's paintings and other artwork, along with essays about his career from all sorts of people, critics, tattoo artists, other artists and luminaries, as well as an intro by Tom Waits and commentary from Joe about some of the paintings themselves. And along with all that, there's a career chronology at the end. And there's actually thumbnails of every single one of his finished paintings. It's also set up chronologically. Yeah, it's all encompassing. And the reproductions are fantastic. There's even these fold out parts that'll give you this idea of the scope of some of Joe's work. And seeing Joe Coleman's artwork up close and getting to see the detail sections that are there, the close-ups of some of the paintings, it brings you face to face with the incredible amount of information, signal art, I guess, that he brings to all these pieces. And you can see the vivid detail of the portraits that are usually at the center of these pieces of murderers and scoundrels and movie stars and other American outlaw heroes. And this whole sideshow phantasmagoria of image and stories and text and other elements that he brings to just every inch of the surface of this stuff. It's almost fractal. It's like if you kept going deeper, more world to be revealed in his work. I don't know how to tell you, man. It's like, we talk about it a little. It's like this asynchronous universe that's kind of laid out before you as a viewer, where color and form and words and mimesis, it all coheres in this frozen instant for us that represents a lifetime for him. I don't know, maybe pause this and go to joecoleman.com and look around, get an idea of what the art looks like. It's JoeColeman. And come back. I'll wait a second. Okay. All I could tell you is this book brings you up close to Joe's world or worlds. The painting, his performance art, the obsession with fireworks and blowing himself up, the biographical subjects, like the murderer Carl Panzram and the Elephant Man and Freud and Ed Gein and the pirate Albert Hicks, who I'd never heard of before this book, Jane Mansfield and Johnny Eck, the guy who was born with no torso, or nothing below the torso, that guy from Freaks by Todd Browning, Hunter Thompson and Hank Williams Jr. and ever present in the last 30 years or so of Joe's work, his wife, Whitney Ward. Anyway, we'll talk about it. Joe makes these paintings. See, that's what I'm trying to get at. He describes it. He takes this jeweler's hypervision goggles, that sort of shade you put on your forehead. It's got the goggles, or the lenses in front of you, and he gets up close to the surface with a single bristle brush, and he makes these incredible works. And they're enormous, some of them. Some are more self-contained, and we talk about that and how the art and the material dictate what's going to be there. But now is when I tell you, I never got to see one of Joe's pieces in person until we met to record. I first saw his stuff in a comic book in Taboo, this anthology, back in 1992 when I was in college. And I'd heard his name over the years, and I'd seen some of his work in the transgressive world he belonged to. But until Whitney, his wife, met me at the door, and she directed me into this drawing room where I set up my mic so we could record with me and Joe. And I looked up and I saw A Doorway to Whitney, this like 7-foot tall companion painting to A Doorway to Joe, which is the painting that this book is named after. That was on the wall, just looking down at us, or at me. And I just, after I finished setting up, I just went over there and started looking at all these details. And I thought about this in advance, ruing that I wore my contact lenses. I couldn't have done this long drive to an undisclosed location upstate New York in my glasses, but I was bummed that I had my contact lenses in, because it meant I couldn't get closer to the painting and actually see what's there. So what I'm saying is, if you ever get an opportunity to see Joe's paintings in an exhibition or in someone's private collection, go and go take in the whole thing. And then, because there's going to be one supplied somewhere, go pick up a magnifying glass and start exploring, because the art never stops. And it never stops being about Joe, no matter what the subject is. So I'm rattling on. Anybody who's a fan of Joe's who's never listened to the show is just going to be more and more irate that this thing goes on forever. I apologize. But to get back to things, A Doorway to Joe came out recently from Fantagraphics, and our mutual friends, Patrick McDonnell, the cartoonist behind Mutts, who's been on the show a few times now, and Karen O'Connell told me they were dying to get me and Joe together to record. They knew each other. They all knew each other since the 70s when they were in a band called the Steel Tips, which we'll talk about. And they made a call, and Joe and Whitney were on board, and I drove to aforementioned undisclosed location in upstate New York on a Saturday and entered another world. See, when they lived in New York City for the longest time, they moved to New York, upstate a few years ago. And their home back in the city was known as the Auditorium, like ODD, instead of AUD. And it was filled with artifacts and relics of our darker history, all sorts of infamous events and figures that are memorialized in Joe and Whitney's collection. And the book goes into that too. There's chapters on every aspect of Joe's life, including the auditorium. But it was weird to see those pieces around me, right alongside Joe's paintings that I was finally getting exposed to for the first time. And I don't really have the vocabulary, the emotional or cognitive access to convey to you guys what it was like to be in their home and to talk with Joe and Whitney and to see this world around them that they've built. It was like it's like being in another world, like I said, and not a private world of the two of theirs. You know, like we know people who just kind of, their homes become this kind of shell, like they're snails or hermit crabs or something. But that's not what this was. This was like an unfolding into a higher or lower plane, you know, like between the art and the reliquary, as he describes it in our talk, and the decor, which I haven't even gone into. There's so much emanating from every corner of this place that I felt like I was overwhelmed. And as you can tell, I might still be. And after we finished, Joe took me up to his studio, showed me the new painting that he's making, which I was nervous. I didn't know if I should ask, but he did. And there were more of the oddities and objects. And I realized that they felt less like a collection and more like an accretion disk, if you know anything about astronomy, more like the things that collect around a body from gravity, like the gravity of Joe's art all these years has brought these things to him, to them, because he credits Whitney as his muse, and the two of them, I having seen the paintings now, I understand the partnership that these two have. I don't know. I'm still there in some ways. And I've talked with other guests, and I've gone on about this in all these interminable introductions to the shows about that intertwining of life and art, that living of one's art. And I don't think there's a better example of it than Joe and Whitney. Yesterday, I was talking to a friend in New York at his place, and we were catching up. I was recording an upcoming episode at my friend's apartment. And when I tried to talk about my personal life, it was all just these fitful stabs of gibberish. I got lucky because he asked me about work, and I pivoted on a dime and talked about all that stuff with total clarity and coherence, and explained all of this stuff that I do by day that allows me to do this stuff for 600 episodes now. But I don't know how much of my scrambledness when I was trying to talk about things derives from my 50 plus years of repression and anxiety versus the experience of visiting Joe and Whitney a couple of weekends ago, and just kind of not just stepping into another world, but that realization and acceptance that this world has been out there the whole time. I also really want to tell you about the new painting Joe's working on, but I'm going to keep that treasure to myself. I don't think Joe would mind if I talked about it, but I want to keep it. I want to keep the memory of it. It is a Coleman, but the subject matter and the palette seem different than what came before. I really hope I get to see the final piece. Christ, I can go on. There is more than enough in our conversation to get you going. So go get A Doorway to Joe, The Art of Joe Coleman. It's out now from Fantagraphics. It is a big hardcover with this transparent cover, plastic transparent cover, shows the portrait, Doorway to Joe portrait for the main image itself. It's a marvel. And thanks again to Patrick McDonnell and Karen O'Connell for making this happen. And 600 episodes in, thanks to all of you who have also helped make this show happen. As I said, to any of you who are newbies, I apologize that you had to put up with this whole time. As caveats go, there's a freight train running nearby every so often. You'll hear that. There's a little bit of static on both of our lines. I zapped most of that. And Joe also wears jewelry, and he's got a lot of little things attached to his vest of his three-piece suit. So there's some clacking. Here is Joe Coleman's bio from the book. Joe Coleman is a world-renowned painter, writer, and performer who has exhibited for 5 decades in major museums throughout the world, including one-man exhibitions at the Palais de Tokyo in Paris, the Kunstwerk Institute for Contemporary Art in Berlin, the Barbican Center in London, and Tilton Gallery and Dickinson Gallery in New York. His collectors have included Iggy Pop, Jim Jarmusch, Anthony Bourdain, Leonardo DiCaprio, and H.R. Giger. Or Geiger, or Giger, I always forget how that's pronounced. He was a subject of an award-winning feature-length documentary, Rest in Pieces, A Portrait of Joe Coleman, from 1997, and lives with his wife Whitney Ward in Brooklyn and upstate New York. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Joe Coleman. How involved were you in putting together A Doorway to Joe?
Well, I was pretty fortunate with this book that I pretty much was hands-on with it since the beginning. It started out as a smaller book that was in conjunction with the show that I was having at the Bakovich Gallery in Fullerton, California. Mm. And I started to realize that they weren't capable of doing the kind of massive book that I wanted to do.
That you so richly deserve.
Well, thank you for saying that, but that's what I really wanted. And so I eventually took it over and then kept adding to it and kept building on what had been started, then. And that was in, I'm sometimes terrible at dates, but it's 2017.
Yeah, the intro said 2017 was the exhibition.
Okay, so, yeah, that's when it started. Okay. Yeah. But, after that, I continued to work on it and expand it, and get more people involved. Mm-hmm. Because there's some really great, like so many of the essays are by the people that I admire in those different fields. And so I kept adding on more and more. And, I needed to find a publisher because even though I was doing,
sort of
putting
on spec
together a book, now I don't have a publisher because originally I had a publisher when we started, but now I had to find a publisher, and my book agent, who's wonderful, Mark Gottlieb, started shopping it around, and oddly enough, what seemed the most appropriate and the perfect place and perfect fit for the book was Fantagraphics. And I guess the reason why I say that is because Fantagraphics did the first book of my paintings called Cosmic Retribution. Mm-hmm. And they did it in conjunction with Feral House, which, was started by my dear friend Adam Parfrey, and the book is dedicated to Adam Parfrey. So it did, it found the perfect home. And I worked with Eric Reynolds, who's great. I'd worked with him before. And, he allowed me to really control, what details, how many details. I said I wanted some fold outs, and, he said, sure, we can do that. He was, totally behind me. And so, sometimes I was a pain in the ass to make sure that because I would, complain that this image is not right. Let me see if I can get a better one. And then I'd have to sometimes reshoot pieces that I didn't think the quality of the reproduction would hold up to that kind of detail. And some of my collectors helped me, like Cause, Brian Donnelly. Yeah, okay. And he shot Wolfley for me, because he has a lot of my work, and he was very generous in helping me get new high.
Yeah, I wondered about the
quality,
reproduction
high-res
because so
images,
much of your work at the very end, it shows like all the collections they're in. And I'm like, that getting scans of all that or getting photos of all that had to be a lot of organizing.
You know, Whitney and I did work hard throughout the years to get, you know, the best images, like in the, but even before I was with Whitney, in the early days, I used to have my work shot on these big 8x10 chromes, you know, transparencies, and you can't even find those things.
Yeah, I was going to say, they might have been state of the art once upon a time.
But you know, all that stuff had to be drum scanned in order to be useful, you know, for this book, and most of those were pretty good. The drum scans were pretty good, but some of the stuff just wasn't good enough. Whitney helped me get this other photographer many years ago to photograph my work, Eileen Travell, and she works for the Met, so she shoots old masters' works, so she knows the quality that I want, you know, for the photographs to be properly reproduced. And she's been great, and she's done, you know, she's taken care of, you know, having the best shots of my more recent works. So most of that stuff was pretty easy to get, but the older ones sometimes was a bit of a job.
What was it like looking back? The process, both of looking back at the individual works and organizing this book and seeing the progression you undertook.
Yeah, you learn a lot about yourself, especially because mine are, you know, autobiographical. Yeah. You know, even when they're, you know, based on a historical subject or, you know, or someone from the past who I admired, I still approach it like a self-portrait anyway. I guess the reason why I say that is because, you know, it's my interpretation, and I use things in my life that I can identify and relate to in order to, you know, kind of resurrect a spirit. And, you know, that's the only way I can understand, you know, and empathize and get inside of my subject, you know, and they're not like a normal portrait painter's work because they involve, you know, heavily text, you know, and vignettes and, you know, a dense narrative that exists on the surface all at once. Yeah. And
I wondered about that sense that it's almost, I don't want to say a comic. We know what comics mean.
Yeah.
There's an Everything Everywhere All at Once comic where the entire canvas is.
Sure. I mean, moment. You could, but you could also say that about, you know, like a film that's all at once, or like you know, or a book that's all at once. You don't turn the page, all the pages are right in front of you. And whatever area that you want to start, you know, will actually reveal the story in different ways too. So, you know, each journey is different, you know, for the individual, and also the relooking at a work, it changes.
Do you remember when that mode started for you? Because, I mean, I was going through the chronological paintings at the back of the book, thinking it was going to be the tableau and then a shift into the self-portraits into, as you're describing them, and that's not the case.
No.
So my entire thesis is thrown out. Do you remember, or is there...
No, it's something that happens slowly, you know, and even, you know, almost imperceptive to me. Like, I didn't, you know, I had to maybe, you know, years into it realize, you know, that that
what you were doing.
Yeah, yeah. Because, I don't even sketch anything out. I'm, working on a square inch or smaller for 8 hours. And then I just keep adding another one and another one. And I allow the story to reveal itself to me that way, as I'm doing that, like if I'm doing a historical subject or a biography, I might be doing research. And even if I'm doing a self-portrait, I'm sometimes doing research by interviewing my friends, or, and getting, stuff from them. But as I do the process of research, it comes out directly onto the surface of the painting without any,
preparation.
So it's a learned thing.
Yeah, do you write notes at all?
Yeah, occasionally I write notes,
Yeah.
And sometimes I write them directly on the surface,
Of course,
of the painting, even though I might paint over them.
Yeah.
I do sometimes but I'll even write notes. Like if somebody called me, I'll,
just
and they give me their number, and then I write the number on the painting. But I'm eventually going to paint over it anyway.
Future archaeologists will be doing their whole
Right.
X-ray scanning, and we don't know what these numbers mean, but for some reason, you put
they're
those
going to
on.
think it's some like
Kabbalistic.
exactly, some mystical
That's just
combination of numbers that.
It struck me because I did an episode with Keith Haring's biographer earlier this year, and very, very different artists, but the same. There's no preparation. There's no visual preparation.
Right.
For both of you, it was, this is the canvas we're going to work at. Now, in his case, he'd knock it out a mural in 12 hours and be done.
Right.
And you, like you say, it's a square inch taking you 8 hours to work through.
Yeah. And the, then the structure, which is sometimes, has this geometric,
form.
Form, then, kind of reveals itself to me too. And sometimes I'll react. I'll see something, I'll be painting here for a long time. Then I'll jump over here and paint something. Then I'll jump over there. And then they kind of figure out how they come together and form, this symmetry that's, that's inside, and that's exciting for me because then, I'm learning as I'm painting.
How often do you step back?
I
should note that you do these paintings with those hypervision goggles.
I don't step back that often. I'll step back, when I'm through, of a day, but I don't step back that often when I'm in there because I'm inside this tiny bit of the universe, but for me, it seems like that's what, living things are, all this endless, world within world within world within world, and all of it, living and vibrant and, and crazy and scary and
I was going to say this sort
beautiful.
Of, that sounds like a description of my somewhat psychotic breakdown after 9/11.
Right.
That whole, look, the world is just going deeper and deeper into itself.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're able to make art out of it, where I just got paralyzed by anxiety and everything else for a while.
Well, that's, I guess, a way to work your way out of the madness.
It raises the bizarre and probably really obvious question: when do you know something's finished?
Well, the only way that I know that I'm finished is when I run out of room.
Yeah, I kind of figured that was.
But that's not necessarily the end of the piece because then. A lot of them have frames, and the frames are, sometimes painted frames, but sometimes the the frames contain fetish objects related to the subject.
We're surrounded by
right
objects
yes.
of various kinds.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about conceptually the significance of fetishes and totems and how
because
how you found that significance, I guess.
Well, because in a way, the narrative, is in the paint, and one of the ways to kind of, really connect with the subject is to have some of the subject's DNA, or, even if it's not DNA, even if it's some kind of magical connection. The object, though, does bring, another element, of the soul, of the subject, that I'm searching for. Because, that's, I'm trying to connect, and trying to, I don't know, maybe like a,
the Ouija board?
Yeah, the Ouija board. Yeah, that's why I put my hands down.
Yeah, I thought that's
like
what you were conjuring.
To conjure, yeah.
That's I thought about it in relation to coming up here to sit down with you. The things that I collect, I joke that there is a route out of the house if it's ever on fire or flooding, as we now have to deal with.
Yeah.
Of things to grab, in addition to the couple of hard drives that have all of the audio files I've ever recorded. There's a couple of books that are irreplaceable, not because they're great first editions, etc., but it was, this advanced copy given to me by Clive James, or this book by Barbara Nessim, a reproduction of a sketchbook, things that are unique. And I realized, in thinking about, the auditorium and everything you've put together and the resonances, I realize my life is relatively, constrained by the book thing. It's really tied to that sense of, what matters to me, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I certainly have a great, love, affection, for books, and the actual, the smell of them, the way the paper feels and the cover stock and, the dust jacket and, all these things, have these tactile, almost, like condiments in an experience, that adds to, what you're reading.
There's this little 2 seconds of walking with my dog. When I take him around the corner, there's this one little spot you encounter for a second or two that you have the mildewy kind of smell of 1960s comic books that are going to rot.
Yeah, a ton of them. Yeah.
That smell. And it's just that instant. Every time I pass, I just had that moment of, that's like the comics my father used to bring back from the ham radio festivals that were already starting to turn and eat themselves. But
absolutely.
But it's as opposed to, I'm looking over here. You've got the T-shirt a man was executed in.
Elmo Patrick Saunier. Who was portrayed by Sean Penn in Dead Man Walking. Yeah. And that's a drawing that he did on.
Yeah, he mentioned in the book, the panther that he drew. The things you have, I'd say they're more varied in terms of what they are and the resonances and historicity, as opposed to Gil got to meet, person X and person Y and came back with some books. So, I appreciate and admire.
No, but those are important to me too, like the ones that are more simple and, and connected to my parents or, Whitney or various loved ones.
Had you always had that sort of, I say, attachment to objects, or that recognition of objects?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. From childhood, but, I was also, brought up, Catholic, Irish Catholic. I like to just say Irish Catholic because I always think there's some kind of pagan Celtic, twist on everything that has to be qualifying the Catholicism.
Sure.
And
Catholicism has plenty of paganism throughout,
right.
but
Yeah.
the regional is
And there was something. There's something. Even though I don't believe in a lot of the rhetoric of the Catholic Church, and I feel there's a certain insidiousness about the formal Catholic Church. There is something about, though, the drama and ritual in Catholicism that I was fascinated by since childhood. My mother brought me to St. Mary's Church, and the masses were in Latin at that time, and there was something, I guess, that reminded me also of watching Vincent Price move like some kind of like weird witchcrafty
sorcerer
sorcery going on, and and the drama of the this amazing church with the stained glass, and the architecture is designed to make you feel intimidated.
Yeah.
And the beautiful stained glass, being so preciously, made. The details are all so precious. I've never lost that love for churches, and I like to visit them whenever, I travel, especially in Europe. But there's many churches in the United States that are great. New York City has some, St. Patrick's Cathedral, many. But there was also this thing that the Catholics, obsessed about, that I had a strong connection to, which was the idea of the reliquary. And there would be, these reliquaries that would house, the clothing, or sometimes, body parts, of a holy saint, in order to, make us feel more connected, to something holy, and there was something really compelling about that gets under my skin, literally, And,
the book mentions you've got was it St. Agnes?
Yeah, I have
with
St.
an
Agnes.
actual bone inside.
And also her teeth and hair. I also have this weird reliquary that's supposedly a piece of Jesus, which
I was going to say the pieces of the cross are the things that are,
But Jesus was supposed to have risen, and I don't know, maybe that's a piece that dropped off on the wall.
You shed a skin.
Yeah. But nevertheless, that, there's something that's, of course, if you put together all the shards of the cross,
you
the
got a
cross
forest.
would be like, the Empire State Building. But there's something also about that, even if it's a hoax, that he was worshipped as such.
We invest the meaning in it.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden it doesn't matter anymore, because it's the devotion that makes it holy. Yeah.
You believe in evil?
I used to think that that there was such a thing as evil, and I was trying to figure it out.
A lot of your subjects,
that borderline evil,
or pretty far into evil,
what we know is evil.
Yeah.
But I tend to think now that there isn't really any such.
Yeah.
It's just humanity, and humanity in all of its facets, is pretty fascinating. And, there is something, that was missing in Catholicism for me, which, we were supposed to all worship this all good, God, and it was just one God, and there was something missing about that. I mean, even like in pagan and Greek and Hindu religions, there's all these gods, many gods, embodying all kinds of things that, that involve what humanity really is. And so for me, there was something missing, in the saints represent the martyr, of an atrocity, but the perpetrator of the atrocity is also, involved in that, part of humanity, and one would not exist without the other's presence. And, think about the suffering of the perpetrator as well. It's a very important part of humanity. And for me, I came to think that it's in the pathology, that makes us, brothers and sisters, because we are all born, with death inside of us, with disease, and, and the thing that eventually is going to take us out is with us all, at the moment, of birth. And it's that, the corruption of the flesh, the spirit, that actually makes us all one, and it is holy as well.
Judas hangs himself, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't,
right.
After the crucifixion, doesn't go off and, I'm perfectly fine now. He's...
Yeah. Talk about someone to feel for.
Yeah. So let's talk about mortality and illness a little. You've had health issues over the years, and before we started recording, talked about my dumb leukemia thing. How has health and mortality, I guess, affected your art or affected the way you're seeing life?
I think it has for a pretty long time. Looking at, back at earlier paintings, the painting I did, The Waiting Room, which is, it was after my parents died. Both my parents had cancer too, and I, my father had skin cancer, and my mother had lymphoma, and then she eventually developed cancer of the pancreas and the spleen, and her suffering, was had an effect on me, that continued, in my work. And the cancer of my father affected me as well. He eventually died of a massive heart attack. But there was something, that drew me to it, and to paint it too, and as a way to deal with it. And it was also, sometimes because I was so angry, at God, and at life, itself, and I wanted to, give it back to, as if you could ever make,
Yeah.
You know,
they'll get the last laugh.
God's always going to get the last laugh, or life, or whatever fate. You never win, but that doesn't mean you don't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there's more reason to do it. The loser, element of it was, important to me too. Even if you lose, you still, at least you fought back, and, and then later, more recently I developed T-cell lymphoma, and I thought that was almost like fate messing with me as well, because it's this combination of the two things that that affected me so much in my parents, that I was haunted by it, and then it actually claims me, as well. I was haunted by you too, Joe, just like you were haunted
you kept
by
thinking
me.
about me. And here I am.
Yeah. And so then, T-cell lymphoma appears, which is, the lymphoma, from my mother's side, and the cancer from my father's side, like the mommy-daddy painting, where they're merged together.
That's exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I see my work telling me these stories, and in looking back, you asked me that before. I see that when I look back, at these works, and when I first got T-cell lymphoma too, it was not that well known, so it was pretty mysterious at the time. But I had this wonderful doctor at MSK, Christina Querfeld, and they were talking about like at that time, they were doing these radical, like, radiation things where I could lose my sense of smell and taste, and she said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to experiment with steroid injections directly into the lesion. And so she did that, and they, at first it just went away a little bit, and then it came back. It was here it started, but they've been all over my head. But first one started here, and when they first started, it went away a little bit, but then it came back. And but then she experimented with the dosage of the steroid, and eventually she got it to, like, disappear. But it would come back, but she thought, look, we can handle it this way, but it's like a game of whack-a-mole.
Yeah, I was just thinking you're trying to, there's another one. Yeah.
And that's okay with me. I'm fine with that. That's better than the more radical treatments for it. So when she left the MSK, this other doctor, who I think was jealous of her, because she went on to do these research in LA, and so she's doing great. So this other one, took over, the same position, and she told me, no, we're going to do radiation. That steroid thing, that's not the right way to treat this. That's not the traditional way we do this. And I was like, fuck you.
It's working. I'm going to keep doing this until it stops.
Physician is me, and I mean, I want to get as much information as I can, but it's my body, And she's like using threat tactics and trying to scare me into using it. And I was like, forget it. And then, I reached out to Querfeld, and she found, someone who would do her treatments locally, so I can have it done. And so, I mean, knock on.
There's wood here somewhere. There we go.
There we go. So I don't mind a game of whack-a-mole. I always like that in the carnival. Anyway.
Yeah, there's so many aspects of your painting seem to predict aspects of your life, or at least correlate with them. I mean, the mutants. The very first thing I ever saw of yours, as far as I know, back when I was in college, I was getting Taboo, that anthology by Steve Bissette.
That's right.
I'm pretty sure that's the first Coleman piece I ever saw, which, again, mutant people, lesions on the face, and everything else. That I'm not saying you brought this on yourself through your art or anything, but it's amazing what's in it.
You could read it both ways. I mean, you could read it as a vision of something to come, but one that was, connected even in the earliest work to my parents, which is, if you believe, the genetic predisposition, then, it was there,
How did the work change after they were gone? Did you, this is something I come up with a lot of guests. Was there any, I don't want to say permission thing, but was there any sort of artistic liberation when they were both dead?
Well, I mean,
you were already doing your thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I specifically did a funeral ritual performance, for them, which got me arrested. So, I mean, I literally, did do a whole, public ritual in funeral, my own style, for both of them, at the Film and Video Arts Foundation in Boston. And
you were arrested as an infernal machine.
Yeah. And so, and the mice were that day called Mommy and Daddy, and because I had this antagonistic relationship with my father, I bit Daddy's head off and spat it into the audience, but Mommy's head I swallowed, so I could incorporate her. But then she being a good Catholic girl, when she married my father, she was, a priest told her she was going to burn in hell for eternity, and that made me really angry. And so I started lighting fires in theater and lit myself on fire, blew myself up, and had this mannequin of me on fire. And the fire alarms went off, and the Boston bomb squad and the fire department came. That's when they charged me with possession of an infernal machine.
Which no one had been arrested for 100 years.
Well, that's what my lawyer said, this, the
aspect of criminal code nobody had looked at for a long time.
Yeah, we haven't seen that one in years. And
but did you see things?
And I asked, well, what's the infernal machine? And you're the infernal machine.
But did you see things change in your art after? Or would that have been not coincidental, but you had so many other aspects of life?
I don't know if
you can separate that out.
I didn't actually. I mean, maybe somebody else.
You have a lot of essayists looking at your work in different ways in the book. But.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't necessarily see it. I mean, it did change because I was changing, but it didn't seem like any kind of radical
break in
what I was pursuing, because the pursuit of pushing myself to these boundaries of sanity even, and I was trying before that, and continued for a little bit of time after that too. And I see the work change a little bit more significantly when Whitney came into my life. Because that was even though I thought I was in love before, I had never experienced the kind of love that I have for Whitney before. And so to me, I could see more I could see an aspect of change there more dramatically than than I could after the death of my parents.
I do have the note, Infernal Machine marries a mermaid, which I thought was a nice
Right.
combination.
All right.
I'll ask in relation to change then. You mention in the book that you have painted her more than any other subject.
Yeah.
Have you seen change in the way you've rendered her over time? It's been about 30 years since you met from that. I'm going like a detective from the timeline that's in the book, so I'm trusting that stuff.
Yeah. I think it's changed. I can show you the most recent painting I'm doing later if you want.
I wasn't sure if you're
I can
really
show you.
Stickler about that stuff or not. I was going to ask, but
yeah, I can show it to you, and she's prominent.
Mm-hmm. And she's looking down on us here from the
and she's
the door.
right in this room right now. Yeah, she continues, to be like a major aspect of my work. Mm-hmm. She has, for quite a few years now. So it was my friend Harold Schechter, who's a true crime writer. I did a portrait of him in here. Called me up after seeing the painting that I'm working on right now, and he said that my life kind of echoes, Dante's Descent, and that Whitney is like Beatrice at the end.
The imagery.
Yeah, and that's what he was saying, which was interesting, I thought. But so he was seeing, these changes.
Yeah, that's what I wonder when you. And I wasn't sure how involved you were, so I'm glad to find out that you were integral in making the book. That sense of retrospection, that you've had gallery shows, you've appeared, you've had, we'll say, retrospectives of sorts, but for you to look back and on yourself over this time, which again is sort of a Dante moment too, when he's headed up to Paradiso, she has him look down on the world again and everything he's traveled through before. This is. I'm really fascinated by that notion of you getting to see in progress. You're not 70 yet. You've still got a lot of years ahead of you of work. So
I'll be 69 in November, and then next year though I will be 70. Yeah. So it's calling. It's saying but we don't have to push.
We're going to say mid-career retrospective. I'm going with many more years ahead.
I hope. Yeah.
But that sense of again, knock wood. That sense of change and that sense of what you find. I'm wondering, in relation to say COVID in the last few years, while you're working on the book, you're also making new art. What directions did you find yourself going in recent years? I guess the post-COVID aspects did appear interestingly. I mean, I hadn't thought about it that much, but I started to incorporate, the Hubble camera that's recording these amazing images, of what's beyond this planet, and all of a sudden that's become you'll see it in the Sorcerer's Mirror painting in here, and it's continued with the one that I'm working on right now, but that didn't really happen until COVID happened, and so that's been an aspect that is definitely, new to my work. And just came about from
I don't know. It captured me. I guess I'm getting close to the other side, and I always thought that like we don't have kids, but but we have a lot of nieces and nephews. So I've experienced these children coming into the world, from like babies, and now I've seen them all, get married and have babies of their own. And I always think when I see like the baby, it has knowledge of, life before life, of what that is, which I don't know. And I don't think any living being, really needs to know that, even though we all ask the question. I don't think anything living needs to know what that is. But I think if any living thing does have knowledge, it's the ones that are so close to it. Yeah. And so I just feel like the universe, those are like those Hubble photographs are like looking into, that the other side. That's what it looks like to me.
And since I asked the evil question, I should also ask the afterlife question. Belief?
The only thing that I end up with, and I might struggle with thoughts. The final thing that I always come to is that it's not important.
Yeah.
Because you're going to know, when it's time. Everybody does, and nobody knows right now, and nobody will know, until they get there. And there's time enough, you got to concentrate on this,
spending years and years on a single.
Yeah. That's what I need to do. Like all of that other stuff, I'll find out when I need to.
Yeah. So tell me about the subject matter, just the sense, the murderers, the historical figures, the Hunter Thompsons, the people you settle on. What's the process like, just to decide this is what I'm doing?
I guess the process is primarily instinctive. Sometimes it gets inspired by outside sources, like in my painting of Indian Larry, who is a dear friend of mine. When he died, I was compelled to do that painting of him. Larry had always wanted me to do like a painting on. He was a chopper builder, really famous, well known at the time. I hope he's still known because he did amazing work.
You immortalize him.
Yeah, I loved him, and he wanted me to work on a bike with him, but I didn't. I kept I just didn't feel like I wanted to do it. And then, but then after he died, I was like, oh shit, I got to do this project with Larry.
Yeah.
And so I made, this loving, dedication to him. And and then I used, motorcycle parts
to build
bikes that he never got to complete to frame it. And then I had the guys at Larry's shop do the welding of it because I want their hands in there too, their DNA, and everybody's involved. And I had friends of his collect Indian head pennies, and then I used this striped, biker shirt that he wore a lot that I mounted it on. You only see little bits of that.
Yeah, I saw the frame on the outside of it. Yeah.
Right, but if you go on the back, you can see the shirt stretched out. And, you only see little bits of it peeping out the sides, but when you turn it around, you see the back. And so then so that sometimes outside things, specifically take a hand in it, in the choices that I'm making.
there other forms you wanted to work in? You done, I mean, primarily painting, even when it's the three-dimensional, I forget what you call them, those triptychs that
yeah, well, anyway, well, yeah, I mean, I work the Sorcerer's Mirror is very three-dimensional because that has several, it's a shadow box with
that's what I'm thinking of.
Three-dimensional figures in it, and several different layers. And also the glass itself is painted. So you have, all these different layers in this minute, precious little box. So,
but other forms, sculpture, other things, are there any?
Well, those are sculpture.
Yeah.
And I think that
I wasn't sure if other forms would have too much of a learning curve.
Well,
compared to I know what I'm doing with painting, but
the one that my mother aspired to be an actress, and she had she was beautiful. She was like she would come to pick me up at school, and she was dressed like a movie star, and like kids are like, that's your mom. And so she always she put the bug about performing in me. And so I stopped doing performance art, but for a while I did acting. I've acted in just a handful of movies, but I do enjoy doing that. I played Harvey Weinstein, and
Asia Argento's
Scarlet Diva, which is at least a footnote in film history, because that was before it was all exposed, and she was one of the people that exposed it, and that was the first time it was ever put, on film. It was courageous of her to do that.
Yeah, I have to watch it. I read about it in your piece and just had I should probably give that a viewing and see how directly it was.
Yeah. Well, that whole film is autobiographical, Scarlet Diva. She's tough, and I admire her. She's pretty great. We became good friends.
Now, I should ask, you mentioned performing, doing performance art. Before that, the reason we are sitting together is because you used to be in a band called the Steel Tips.
That's right, because Patrick and
Karen.
They gave me, they were mentioning that you wanted to do this in a course, anything that.
And Patrick does ask.
Yeah.
Any memories? Any Steel Tips stories to share with that?
I mean, Steel Tips was I kind of call it pre-Professor Mambuzu, because the character that I was in Steel Tips, I used to call Mad Dog.
Yeah.
I guess was like when Leo Gorcey was a dead-end kid, he was Spit. But then when he did his own series in the Bowery Boys, he was Slip Mahoney.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a slightly different character.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they were more fun, the Steel Tips performances. When I started doing the Dr. Mambuzu performances, they got a lot darker.
Yeah.
And the name Mambuzu is mom and Buzo, so it was my mother and father.
Yeah.
And but back in the Steel Tips days, I had a lot of fun with
sort of a punk.
Yes, sort of. Yeah. I mean, certainly it was punk, but it was not. It wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy fit. Into any real.
Yeah.
But, some of my favorite times back then, probably my all-time favorite time in Steel Tips was when we got to perform with Edie Massey, Edie, the egg lady from Pink Flamingos, And John Waters and I became friends later, but this was before that, and I always loved his films. And so we were doing, we were on a double bill at CBGB's, and so Edie and I hit it off, and so we performed together, and I got this big coat that both of us could fit in, so I put my arm in one side, and Edie put her arm, in the other side of the coat, and we became this two-headed monster, and we were like insulting the audience, and it was that was one of my all-time favorite.
And you got to appear on Uncle Floyd.
Yeah. Uncle Floyd was another favorite.
I was on, we were in the audience when I was in nursery school, like 3 or 4 years old. They brought us to the Uncle Floyd show.
Oh, that's great.
I have vague memories of this, but reading your book and an appearance, I'm like, wow, we have something weirdly in common. We were both on the Uncle Floyd show, except I didn't smash bottles on my head.
Right, yeah. And Uncle Floyd he was like, now kids, Joe's a professional. Don't try this at home. But it was real. I was really bleeding on it.
Yeah. Do you, near the end of the book, in your timeline, there's a mention of you appearing on an Anthony Bourdain episode.
Yeah.
It turns out to be the very last one of Parts Unknown, aired after Bourdain's suicide, about the Lower East Side.
Yeah.
And throughout, we watched the episode last night, which I'd seen a few years ago, but throughout, Bourdain is asking everybody about nostalgia and whether they miss the Lower East Side of the 70s. And pretty much to a person, they're all like, no, it was hell to live through. We did great stuff, but we would not go back for $1 million. That's what do you miss? Do you miss of that era and that New York?
I don't know. Did he? I don't think
he asked you.
I don't remember.
Like Lydia Lunch tore him to pieces for trying to have nostalgia for that era, and a few other people were all, no, I wouldn't go back. It was awful. We were getting mugged all the time. It was terrible.
No,
yes, we
I
could
actually
perform,
have a lot of fondness for it. Yeah, and I think New York City is has suffered a bit from being too cleaned up.
Yeah.
I thought, especially, it was important for any major city of the world to have a red light district, because I thought that kept it vibrant. And what, even though I wasn't born in New York City, I specifically came to New York City because of the fact that it would have this seamy side, and I lived in the Lower East Side when the Lower East Side was dangerous, and that was the appeal of it, and also we could pay very little money, and like I drove a taxi cab during the Travis Bickle era, and I made enough money in 2 nights that
Fred Leibowitz did the same thing. Like back in the 70s, it was a weekend's work was rent for the month.
And then I could just paint and do whatever performance, if it was Steel Tips or Professor Mambuzu, but it was such a great time, for me. It's such an exciting time, and I was inspired to paint the things that I saw on the streets, and, it must have been like, what George Gross, was seeing in, the Weimar Republic and, in Germany, and what inspired him and what inspired Otto Dix, and I felt, man, this is great. Look at all of this vibrant, scary, life, but that's what made it exciting.
As you render them in those earlier paintings in the 70s and 80s, they are mutant, horrible, Boschian scenes.
But that's what was, that was what, got to me and made me excited to get, home and start painting what I'd seen. And, so I do miss those days, and I kind of, moved away from New York because it lost its charm.
I was going to ask, we're in an undisclosed location that is not New York City. What was that process for you, leaving the city?
It was hard, but especially getting the objects here, because a lot of them are fragile, and but now I have to deal with other fragile things. But I dealt with like floods in the city too, so that's not new. But yeah, getting the stuff here, I had to use a lot of it. Whitney and I did,
sort of piecemeal.
Yeah, piecemeal. But the really important and hard to deal with works, I used the art handler to bring here, and and I've it's people that I know because they've dealt with they brought the Whitney painting here, so then they could do other stuff too,
as opposed to the buffalo head over you, which is actually only the second buffalo head I've had in a guest's podcast room. Jerry Moriarty was the other
okay.
one. So.
Well, good. Yeah, Jerry's an old friend.
Yeah,
that's nice.
Yeah, we I drove 3 hours up to his place, and we went, and I looked. Oh, there's a giant buffalo head sitting there, and that was
yeah.
It was an interesting podcast in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
but yeah,
how's Jerry doing?
This is all pre-pandemic, but he was good.
He's living in his parents' home.
He bought his parents' home.
Yeah.
Which had been owned by other people in the interim. But when he moved back up to his hometown and discovered that his parents' home was for sale, after about a year, he decided to buy that and move in. I live in the house I grew up in. I've been there almost my entire life. So
wow.
Jerry and I had a weird... I never really left. You at least had 45 years or so in New York City. But,
did you inherit?
Not officially. It's a complicated story, but I live in the house I grew up in, and sort of we'll figure out what happens in a couple of years based on actuarial tables where my old man's going. But we'll see.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I will invite you guys down there someday. It's 25 miles from New York, but you can see the city from a mile or so away from my house. You get the entire New York skyline in the distance.
Yeah, we'll have to come visit you.
And you'll see the library and the books that I will grab on the way out of the house when it's either flooding or burning down, but which we hope won't happen. But that's
now you need to knock on wood.
Yeah, that's true. I got the little nothing's gonna go up. We had a little flood last week, but nothing major. I was gonna ask the usual dumb question is asking about an artist's influences, but it occurs to me you've been making art you've been making paintings since the mid-'70s, as you show in here. Your influence on other people? Do you see artists who, not a Joe Coleman ripoff, but do you see your influence on others?
I do. I
in a way that's not insulting or copyright infringement?
Well, I mean, sometimes they border on that, but yeah, I do. But, I don't. I don't think about it that much. I got my own.
Yeah. I wonder whether there's we don't have kids, either of us, and whether you see that sense of lineage in any way or legacy, or is it contained in the art itself?
I think the kids are the paintings, and the works are the kids, actually. Because the kids are the ones doing the influence, I influence the kids, and then kids.
And you send them out into the world.
Yeah.
Where do you see the work going? I know you're going to show me what you're working on, but we talked about change in retrospection. Do you see a direction things are going? You mentioned the Hubble influence, but
I try not to think. So I don't want to think ahead because thinking gets in the way. I try to keep an open mind, to whatever my influences are, of the moment or of the week or of the year, whatever they are. I want to just allow them to happen. So I try not to
Did you read the essays in the book or not?
Yeah, I
wonder if you do that.
It's hard to do. But,
that's because they say some very insightful, thoughtful, and laudatory things about you. But I wasn't sure if there's a degree of I don't need someone else's analysis of my stuff in my head.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess because I cared so much about producing the book. I did, and I tried to, select things, in pages that related to the, the particular author of whatever piece it was. So yeah, I tried to do that, and I mean, I'm honored by the amount of talent, of writers, that are, contributing to this book. Very honored.
The vibe I had was just that sense of, boy, it would be wonderful if somebody was saying these things about me, but I wouldn't want it getting in my head. So yeah,
yeah, right. You kind of
either in terms of going to your head or just making you.
I mean, I had to because I'm putting the book together, so there's a certain amount of that has to, but you try not to get too involved.
Yeah. I guess I could ask the influence question. Where did the...
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind, certainly. I have influence, I have influences from, from comics, from movies, from writers, and a lot of them I honor, and, I guess there's some that I, haven't gotten to that I also feel strongly about, music, does, influence me while I'm painting, like right now, the current painting that I'm working on has very little text, like so many of my paintings are dense with text, but I find myself listening to, music with, no lyrics, which I thought was interesting. So I just found myself doing that. I didn't intentionally do that, so, I was listening to Gesualdo and, Edgar Varese and Penderecki. So I found myself listening to these things that don't have words, entering my head. So and I just found it, I just found it interesting. Because sometimes in the past, like when I played, Hank Williams music and I started a painting and I didn't even know I was going to paint them. And then all of a sudden I found myself painting them because maybe, because I started, playing his music and he just got in me.
Where did the text begin in the paintings?
Well, I guess, there's a couple of, certainly it connects to, to comics and it, it also connects, in the way that I like literature, but it also connects to illuminated manuscripts, and it maybe specifically has an element of what I'm perceiving as reality, because like right now, I see you, but I'm also seeing, the room that we're in. I might be thinking about something, related or unrelated to what we're talking about. And we're talking, so what we're saying, is like text, and some of the things that come to my mind are words, and so the experience of reality involves text, as well as images, as a perception that's happening all at once.
It's a challenge. It's, you know, trying to explain your work to my wife was one of those, let me just show you the book instead, and you'll get an idea. And she just had, first thing I did was fold out the end with the two, a doorway to Joe and a doorway to Whitney that we get. But, you know, the idea of creating a form of art that is not explicable. There's not an easy, you know, oh, well, what he's doing is this in the tradition of that. You know, is what I find. I guess it's one of those classification things. Like, oh, where does Joe fit in you know, the continuum of art?
And it's not easy,
And I don't know how much of that matters to you, whether it's ever outside of, you know, the commercial aspect of you know, selling art, whether it matters to really say
it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I mean, I always admired works, you know, that were not that easily explainable either, and artists that, you know, chose a difficult path. So, you know, what's important in the work is what's important to me. You know, it's great, you know, to you know, be able to survive, you know, these many years, you know, by the sale of my work, but I'm really doing it for me, you know, and I'm the only one I had to please, but I am also the hardest to please.
Yeah.
I'm harder on myself than you know, anyone else could be.
Longest you've worked on something that didn't work, or does everything eventually work, or become repurposed into something else? I guess. Almost never do I give up. You mentioned, like in the book, that the Hank Williams one you knocked off the wall.
Yeah, but I kept at it.
Then you started sanding it and realized it had a nice smirk on the face.
Yeah, He just wanted for me to haul off and punch him in the face. But yeah, I might have broken it, but it stayed together, and he was happier, and I was happier.
And happy with the book?
Yeah. I'm real happy with the book. I mean, I'm always never, you know, there's always a part of me that's never satisfied. You know, I don't think I've ever made the you know, quite the painting that I wanted to make, but I think that's what keeps you going. You know, like the endless search. You know, if I suddenly made the painting, you know, exactly the way that I put all of my efforts towards, and it worked, maybe I would stop and never do another painting. I think that's part of what keeps you going. That's, you know, the energy, you know, and that's the life force, you know, of pushing and never being satisfied. Like once you start slowing down and you start, you know, resting on your laurels, as the saying goes, then you're doomed.
Are you able to work with the same intensity? I mean, age is a number on all of us, you know, but.
Of course, you know, I'm older, you know, but I'm still pushing myself really hard. I mean, the last painting in the book is the last painting that I'd finished, The Sorcerer's Mirror. And that's really small and compact and unique. I mean, it looks like Joe Coleman, but it's also unique.
Yeah.
You know, and
so
I'm pushing myself again.
You surprise yourself.
Yeah.
Continually.
Yeah.
Because that's from the beginning. You were describing that sense of, you know, that something is occurring to you in the moment.
Yeah, and that surprised me. And the one I'm working on now is surprising me.
We're going to go check it out in a minute. Yeah. But the question I always ask people, which I should have warned you was coming, what are you reading?
What am I reading right now?
I don't know if you're doing research for a painting, you shouldn't tell me what it is. But.
No, it's okay. I mean, the last thing I was reading in the bathtub was Chester Gould's story on the brow.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I was just.
Dick Tracy on.
Yeah, Dick Tracy. Yeah.
I'll say, I never appreciated Gould until about a year ago. I was at a festival and I was shit-talking Chester Gould to a cartoonist because, we all have our Mount Rushmores and Pantheons, and this guy sent me a PowerPoint afterwards to explain exactly why Chester Gould should be regarded among the top of the 20th century. And
works beautiful. Yeah.
I'm looking, I'm like, I was full of shit completely. I get it. I should have been a little more open about this stuff. But.
Well, that's okay. But I was just answering your question.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I always have to weird digression of my own to go in. But yeah, that's, as far as the work you do and all the reading and everything else that sinks into you and then comes out on the page or on the, I don't even want to say canvas. I don't know what you're actually painting on.
Canvas, it's wood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
canvas would, prevent the kind of detail that I'm after. I want the surface as smooth as glass, because any texture would prevent, the information that I could uncover.
Yeah, with a single hair brush.
Yeah, really get in there.
You boggle my mind. Anyway, Joe, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I really want to thank you for A Doorway to Joe.
Oh, thank you.
Is, well, I'd say it's a Bible of sorts. It's an amazing work.
Well, thank you, Gil. It's a real pleasure to do this interview with you.
And that was Joe Coleman. Go get A Doorway to Joe, The Art of Joe Coleman, out now from Fantagraphics. It's an amazing book about a great American artist. And I know I prattled on insanely in the introduction. I did not do justice to Joe's work. This book does. It's truly a marvel. You should also check out Joe's site, joecoleman.com, to learn more about his work and his life and upcoming exhibitions and appearances and performances and other stuff. And there's videos of past events that he's done. And there's a whole section of photo gallery on some of the contents of the auditorium. And he's doing some appearances for the new book. So try to go see him. If you find out that there's an exhibition of his work, like I said, go and take in a dark cosmic exploration of America and the human soul. That's what I was trying to get at. Now, you can support the Virtual Memories Show by telling other people about it. Just let them know there's this podcast this guy's put out 600 episodes of. Comes out every week. And he's got these great conversations with really fascinating artists and writers and cartoonists and musicians and all sorts of creative cultural people. You can also help out the show by telling me what you like and don't like about it, besides the interminable introductions, and letting me know who you want to hear me record with, or what movie or TV show or book or comic or piece of music or theater or art exhibition or whatever you think I should turn listeners on to. And you can do that by sending me an email, by DM if we're connected on Blue Sky or Instagram, postcards, letters. I love getting postcards. I put my mailing address at the bottom of the newsletter I send out twice a week, so you can get it from there. Or by leaving me a message on my Google Voice number. That's 973-869-9659. That goes directly to voicemail, so you don't have to worry about getting stuck in an awkward conversation with me. And messages can be up to 3 minutes long, so you go longer than that, you're going to get cut off. Just call back and leave another message. And let me know if it'd be okay to include your message in an upcoming episode of the show. You might have something interesting to share with the listeners, but I'd never run something like that without the speaker's permission. So let me know. Now, if you got money to spare, I've got a Patreon, I got a PayPal. The newsletter also allows you to pay, but there's no pay tier or anything. Don't give me money. My day job treats me fine. I mean, as I mentioned at the end of the intro, I might actually be diverging into two separate human beings, one of whom is actually competent and the other one's losing his mind. But whatever. The day job treats me well. So give money to other people and other institutions in need. You can find people through GoFundMe, Patreon, Kickstarter, Crowdfunder, Indiegogo, all those crowdfunding platforms. You'll find people who need help making rent or medical bills or car payments or veterinary bills or getting an artistic project going. And a few dollars from you might make a real difference in their lives. Now, when it comes to institutions, I give to my local food bank and World Central Kitchen every month. I make targeted election contributions, but that day job it involves lobbying, so that's part of my gig. But I give to Planned Parenthood, Women's Choice, Freedom Funds, and the Poor People's Campaign. There are all sorts of things that if you got a little money to spare, you might be able to help us build a better world. So, I hope you will. Our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You should visit my archives to check out my episode with Hal from the summer of 2018 and learn more about his art and painting. And you can listen to his music at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. And that's MAY4TH. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another great conversation. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at vmspod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube, Spotify, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please tell your pals, talk it up on social media, and go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. It all goes to helping us build a bigger audience. Now, you've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.